Welcome to Angloromani with Pricey. I'm Pricey, and if you want an introduction to the Angloromani language, I strongly suggest that you go and watch the introductory video for this series before you come back and watch this. Today, I'm talking about two particularly politically charged words, Romani and Gorger.
We're Romanis. For eons we've wandered the stars looking for love. It's our way.
Huh?
You don't know anything, do you? Romanis are gypsies. And you know what we call someone like you? A gaucho. That means a bumpkin who doesn't know which way is up.
Gaucho, I like that.
Oh, Cowboy Bebop. I do love you. You're my second favourite anime series, but this scene always makes me cringe really hard. So, the term Romani obviously refers to the Roma people. It comes from the word Roma, and that in turn seems to have some link to its origin point in North India, what is now Rajasthan, and it seems to be disputed if there is a link between the Rom people with an R, O-M, and the Dom people with a D-O-M. If it is to do with either of those groups, it seems to have come from a name for a low caste of people who were musicians and drummers or something along those lines. So it's a very sort of musically linked name according to the etymology at the very least. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning is the word Romani and the word Romania have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and it is completely coincidental that there are a lot of Romani people who live in Romania. But as I've mentioned, Romani people are not from Romania. The name Romania is interesting in itself because it actually has much closer links to the name Roman. A little bit of context with Romania. The Roman Empire shifted to the east at some point in around about the 4th century. And it continued there out of the capital of Constantinople, pretty much abandoning its former capital of Rome. And there was the Eastern Roman Empire, which later got renamed as the Byzantine Empire. No, I think they didn't refer to themselves as Byzantine, they referred to themselves as Romans for all this time. And then they got run out in turn by the Ottomans, who then took over and had their own empire there. Now, the Roman people, the Byzantines who were living there, they sort of emigrated north into the far stretches of their previous empire where the Ottomans hadn't yet reached, and they set up a new home there, which they later then called Romania. And from this logic, Romania actually may be the last sort of remnant of the mighty Roman Empire that still exists today. No, it is very culturally different from what it once was. And it just so happens that around about the time all of this upheaval was going on, the Roma people ended up living in what is now Eastern Europe and kind of settling there for a bit. And so you had Roma people who were calling themselves Romani by this point, and Romanians who saw themselves as descendants of Romans effectively at that time, sort of living in the same vicinity, and it just so happened to have very similar names but have nothing to do with each other. Now, regarding the name Romani in my experience and the name Romani in like Britain, in England, funnily enough, it's not actually used all that much. You do a census form, you do some sort of like other form where you're asked about your ethnic identity or something, you might put in Roma or Romani. But generally speaking, in England, the word that everyone uses is Gypsy. As I understand it, Gypsy is seen as a derogatory term in many other parts of the world and is no longer used, which is kind of funny because historically speaking, I don't think it had a place that was intentionally derogatory. May have been sometimes used as such, maybe if certain people meant it in that way, but I don't think its history was that. You see, Romani people eventually arrived in the UK round about the time that modern English was getting started. And at that sort of time, the word that was used for Egyptian was Gypsy. And the name ended up sticking when the English people saw these other people coming in with a different colour skin and a strange culture and going, they must be Egyptian. And they called them after the word that they were using at the time. So not so much derogatory as it is just ignorant. But in the UK and in my family, like when you're referring to your ancestry or wherever, we would all just say, yeah, I'm a gypsy. Or that's a gypsy family, or that's a gypsy name. Like gypsy was the word. Romani was a very official term, only really used on like certain forms and stuff. And I imagine that's probably because by the time those forms existed, there was an appetite to be more politically correct and more historically correct. So yes, in the context of Romani people in Britain today, the word Romani is really only used in like official documentation, or maybe if you're speaking about the international community at large, because we're kind of aware that in other countries people refer to themselves more as Romani. Yeah, it's a strange one. No, we've kind of stuck with using gypsy, and it's not been really a derogatory point. Speaking of terms that can seem derogatory, but in my family and in my experience aren't, let's move on to the next word. Now, in my experience and my family, I can't think of a Romani word that has been thrown around more than the word Gorger. This is a very interesting word because depending on who's saying it and who it's being said to, and in which sort of cultural and national context, it can be viewed as an insult. Certainly, there have been situations that I have seen it used very much in the way that Faye Valentine used it earlier, describing people as a no good bumpkin who doesn't know which way is up. And while I've definitely seen it used that way sometimes, most of the time when I or people in my family have said Gorger, it is literally just to distinguish a separation of people who understand the Romani mindset and have experienced it and are Romani themselves, as opposed to those who haven't. And it is literally just that. You know, my dad might refer to someone as having a Gorger frame of mind or something. I don't think he'd use the word frame of mind, but you know, like a Gorger way of thinking. There's people who experience life this way and think of life this way, and then there is everyone else. In the last few years, I have taken more to the view of there's much more that unites humans than separates us. And when I tend to think of things in this way, and I'm referring to Romani people and non-Romani people, I'll more often than not use the term outsider, which I guess is kind of the cultural context that it gets used in. In my family, we just said it in a very neutral way. The same as you would say that someone is a Londoner, someone is Welsh, someone is Scottish, someone is French. You're just basically saying the cultural background of where that person comes from. Something along those lines. But I understand that depending on the national and cultural location that you find yourself in, it's worth having this in mind. In England, it very much is just there's Romani people, gypsies, and then there's everyone else, Gorgers. And that's basically that. Now, the word Gorger itself seems to be an anglicisation of the much wider used Gaj, or Gadger, or Gadji, or as Faye pronounces it, Gouger. And this word seems to have come from an ancient Indian language equivalent of villager, which kind of makes sense. If you think about Romani people migrating through places and being continuously on the move, they'd be moving through countryside quite a lot, and the people who were settled that they'd come across very often would be villagers. So it definitely makes sense that that would be where the origin of the word comes from. No, it does seem to still have some level of dispute. As always, I'm very interested to hear what people's thoughts and questions are about the terms that come up in these videos. So do use the comment section and I'll see you there. In the next video in this series, I will probably be looking at animal names and the very interesting places that they have come from. Feel free to like the video as well as comment anything else that you might want to comment. And until next time, have a good one.